Well, welcome, kids. It's time once again for Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. It is Eclipse Day. It's April 8th. It's today. Listen, I got to break the fourth wall here, kids, because, yes, the eclipse is today, air quotes, because it's Monday, April 8th, when you are hearing this recording. But, of course, it's not April 8th when we record it. That's not possible, right? And normally I don't sort of have any... I mean, it's awkward sometimes for me because I never know, like, what day it is, right? You know, on any given day, I'm writing about tomorrow, recording a video about today, and doing a weekly podcast about next week. And then, you know, once a month, I'm thinking about the whole month ahead, right? So I never know, like, where the moon is. I have to check. So I'm breaking the fourth wall because I know that this eclipse is going to be really intense energetically, and it's like my body isn't there yet. So I don't know what it's going to feel like, but it is today. And if I was confused last week, somewhere, either on this podcast or in a global healing meta, somewhere I accidentally referred to Sunday as the day of the eclipse, Sunday, April 8th, but it's Monday, April 8th. It's always the 8th. And we talked about it in last week's podcast, so I might have accidentally said that it was Sunday, but it is today, exact at 11:23 a.m. Pacific time. Aries sun, Aries moon, conjunct the North Node in Aries, obviously, because it's an eclipse, and that's what makes it an eclipse, and conjunct Mercury retrograde in Aries.
Wow.
So that alone is a powerful thrust forward because Aries energy is the initiating fire sign that says, you know, I move, I go, I'll go first. And it's a North Node eclipse, which is about the future and moving forward. So you've got all of these sensations in this eclipse season that's about moving forward, starting up. Because the eclipse is exactly conjunct Chiron, then that means this whole lunar cycle ahead will have something to do with healing. Now, I can't predict which way it'll go, whether you're going to have the Chiron experience of boo-hoo, my wounds hurt, I've got to heal them, or wow, I'm sitting with the master of the universe who's teaching me how to learn to use the force more efficiently, because those are both Chiron consciousnesses. You know, I saw a meme about this, you know, me with I get so mad at astrologers. But, like, I saw this woman doing, you know, I respect her on the one hand as an astrology teacher, but, like, her language about this eclipse was, this eclipse is going to transform your forward moving, get you into the exact path of your perfect destiny. I was like, well, that's nice. And some people will have that experience.
Yeah, but not everyone.
Not everyone. You know, and you can't really do a good horoscope because horoscopes are bullshit, because if you just look at where 19 Aries hits your sun sign, that will describe one element of how you'll receive the eclipse, right?
Mm-hmm.
But some of us are in more painful places. I got Saturn on my Chiron right now, and this eclipse is on my Jupiter. Jupiter is about expansion and yummy and loveliness, but I've got the planet of lessons on my most wounded spaces. So I am doing both. I got Chiron saying, oh, Michael, look at your gifts and talents you've mustered. Let's get them out in the world even more. And Saturn saying, but yes, oh, Michael, when you close the door and sit on the couch, you might be weeping for your wounded spaces and have a little more, you know, healing to do. So what we know is Chiron is leading the way. That is to say, it is about a healing lunar cycle, whether that means you've got to go do some painful, like, you know, inner child work, or it's about sort of mastering your gifts for using the forces of of existence in order to move forward in that Aries trajectory more powerfully. Both are possible, and it could be a combination of these things. We could be thrusting forward vibrantly while also having to attend to some behind the scenes, wounded consciousness. Because Mercury is retrograde, there's a delay built into the sense of the forward thrust and movement, right? If Mercury weren't turned around, the fiery thrust of the Aries hit would show up only as movement forward. But we've got the planet that rules our perceptions in the sign of readiness to move forward, but in a position that says, no, you can't move yet. There's still some inward considerations to do. So now, again, I can't describe how that's going to be felt by each of you all at an individual level, because for some people, Mercury will be holding you back in frustrating delay upon delay and Mercury shenanigans all over the place. And others of you won't. It'll just be a natural sort of sense that you're turning within and doing some introspection before moving forward. But this is a contradictory energy, and I don't know how it's going to play out, so I'll just share the sensation. You can expect some measure of fiery impulse. It's time to get moving on my goals and projects, and some sense of not so fast, not as fast as you think. There may be delays, and just respect the retrograde. This is a relationship eclipse season. Whereas we don't really think of Aries without Libra as a relationship sign. In fact, it's the sign of me first, me first. You don't count, only I count. But the last eclipse had the full moon in Libra, which is all about us and we, not just me and I. So 2 weeks ago, we had a full moon eclipse that was designed to help remove and release and get rid of obstacles to love and flow in the heart. Libra full moon, that's an eclipse. That's always going to be what happens in a full moon like that. Aries sun says we're aware of the I. Libra full moon says, but the we piece has to be considered. And the transcendent third that's created is an availability for connection that's richer because you've dropped some inhibitions to loving more fully 2 weeks ago. So this forward intention setting Aries consciousness isn't relational in and of itself, but we're in an eclipse season that has the relationship signs, Aries and Libra, activated. So then, if we look at something that Venus is doing with Pluto, that's interesting to me. That Venus, who's in Aries right now, she's not so happy here. It's too much fire, but she's in the same room as the eclipse and Chiron and Mercury retrograde. That's a good thing. Our emotional bodies might be a little more fired up than is comfortable because Venus is in this sign that she hates being in. But as we move through the eclipse, Venus and Pluto are creating a productive sextile. That means that our approaches to love, intimacy, and even finances, Venus, is operating well with power, authority, gravitas, the shadow, the underworld. So if this is going to be a healing lunar cycle, because Chiron is, sort of leading the way by meeting up with the sun and the moon exactly at 19 degrees, then an availability to do deeper shadow work is a benefit. So that means that this lunar cycle up ahead is going to have a lot of deep healing possible. And that might be painful for some, Venus and Pluto aren't necessarily a painful transit per se. But if the heart is open to the underworld and the heart is in a fiery mansion she's not comfortable with, that's a setup for some dicey combustion in shadow work. I say combustion because air and fire. Pluto and Aquarius, air, Aries, fire. So there's a good setup for the deep work needed if that's your story. Mars and Saturn are conjunct during this eclipse in an exact inconjunct, the great eliminator angle, with the south node of the moon. So if Mars is our marching orders and our choices, our decisions, how we approach goals and ambitions, is meeting up with Saturn, then all of us are in a kind of lesson learning moment where Saturn says, hey, slow down, don't move so fast, right? Aries energy will say, I wanted to be there yesterday. But Saturn and Mars together says, no, you got to slow down. And because that gathering of Saturn and Pisces, that's slowing us down so we don't miss anything, hitting the south node in the eliminator angle, means that we're still releasing stuff that inhibits our forward motion, right? So again, more evidence that as we move through this lunar cycle, some shit's gonna go. Don't be afraid to edit, throw things out. Like when transits like this come up in a session for a person's like 2024, I'll say to them something like this: when in doubt, throw it out.
Oh.
Yeah, it's like my little, what's her name? The little Korean, organizing lady. It's my version of that.
Oh,
When in
yeah.
doubt, throw it out means the energetic atmosphere is supporting letting shit go. And while doing that at a psychic level can often be baffling, it's like, well, what am I letting go? It's like, you just keep doing your inner child work and your shadow work and your self-investigation work, and it happens on its own. But when you start editing out drawers and closets, then you're matching with behavior the idea of, I am ready to release shit that is no longer useful. So you might do that this lunar cycle as well. Hey, it's spring cleaning, right?
Yes.
It's your spring cleaning thing. And the last thing I'll say is that over on the other side of the sky, a little bit, in Taurus, you've got Jupiter and Uranus. They're going to conjunct in the next couple of weeks, and that's an epic expansion moment where Jupiter, that brings all the yummy we could ever want, and Uranus says things can change on a dime. Their every 12-year conjunction is an explosion of possibility. So you've got Mars and Saturn in Pisces in a sextile, productive energy, with Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus. And then the new moon splits that sextile into two separate parts. It's an elegant geometrical pattern that is really like a bullet shooting forward. And Saturn and Mars in Pisces say, slow down, don't miss the lesson. Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus says, trust in the possibility that the most ardent wishes you have can come true if you stay steadfast on your path. And then allow the Aries energy to just shoot you forward into this lunar cycle, ready to move through a radical 28 and a quarter days of change, transformation, and new possibilities. So there are two things happening this week that are of note. And one of them actually happens to connect to something I just talked about, which is the Mars conjunction with Saturn that's part of the eclipse today, actually has its perfection on Wednesday. So what that means is
You said perfection?
Perfection. Oh, thank you for calling that out. Perfection is actually a term in geometry that means the angle is at its apex. Its perfection means it's exact.
Okay.
So in today's eclipse, Mars and Saturn are close enough to be conjunct. They're 1.5 degrees away from each other. They are having a conversation where Saturn is saying, slow down. And Mars is saying, all right, because he has no choice. But over the next 3 days, 2 days really, then they'll get together exactly, right? So outside of the influence of this eclipse, which has this wild, powerful, energetic amplification, making yesterday, today, and Tuesday big, thrusty Aries kind of energy where we're going to be moving forward and maybe tripping on ourselves a little. Wednesday's the real break, slow down. There might be an important lesson for all of us midweek. And if we're moving too fast, Saturn and Mars will slow us down, even if they've got to like wrangle you with a rope.
Okay.
You want to slow down on Wednesday because you want to be in a mindful place on Thursday, because Thursday is the inferior conjunction between Mercury and the Sun. This is the exact midpoint of the retrograde cycle. And in that exact midpoint, every single time Mercury goes retrograde, he meets up with the Sun. So the value of this moment inside of every retrograde cycle is that if Mercury is our perception mechanism, and retrograde motion tells us that our perception mechanism is in the below, it's in the unconscious, then we can't be as clear about what's happening in our conscious world. That's the sort of description of why we, get so many breakdowns in communication while Mercury is retrograde. It's because the planet that sees where we're going is turned within, so we trip. So when the retrograding Mercury and the Sun get together by conjunction, then there's like this gift of our conscious awareness shining its light directly down into our unconscious where Mercury is. And Mercury responds by turning up and saying to, or maybe through the Sun, here's what I'm seeing down here in the basement of your mind. So when the inferior conjunction comes, we want to be looking for messages and guidance in all sorts of ways. The direct ways will be direct. You don't have to look for them. Somebody saying something to you about what they're really feeling or thinking or doing, that's a direct piece of communication. You won't have to look for that. But Mercury is a trickster. So you want to look for happy accidents and synchronicities and mistakes that lead to curious sort of, unfoldings. But understand that Wednesday, a little bit Tuesday, a little bit Thursday, may deliver some important guidance mechanism about the process that we still have another 11 days to go through. Getting that sort of aha can often help us understand what the process is that we're engaged in that's in the unconscious, so that we can have a more conscious, aware experience of what we're, going through. So look for the slowdowns and the lessons on Wednesday, and the messages from sideways places on Thursday, and just know we're in it, kids. The second eclipse has happened, and this whole lunar cycle is going to be a bit of a rocky ride. Trust me, you got this. We got this. We will all come out the other side more healed and ready to take on our futures with gusto. Have at it. So Nancy writes me this past week with a question that has to do with eclipses, and I thought, perfect timing. So let us hear what Nancy has to say. As we enter this eclipse season, I was reminded once again of an important event that I have yet to understand: the importance of one's prenatal eclipses. I read that this is an important fact that should hold a place in your birth chart equal to the planetary positions at your birth time and place. The past few eclipse seasons, it is continually being brought to my attention. I've yet to discern what it is. I need to know about it and how it affects my birth and my life. I hope you can touch on this topic in one of your alerts reports so that you help that this eclipse season, I will finally figure it out. She goes on to say a bunch of other things, including, you mentioned clearing your calendar on full moon days. I feel like I should clear my calendar for the entire eclipse season. I get it, honey. Yes, I do clear my calendar on full moons because most full moons, I just feel a little bit overwhelmed with energy. I call it moon sick. But prenatal eclipses. This is actually one of those techniques in astrology that when I came to it and learned about it 20 whatever something years ago, I played with it for a while and then I just didn't get enough personal sense of juiciness from it. So I'm no expert in this. So I want to start right there. Nancy, it is definitely a thing. And I know very little about the thing itself, prenatal eclipses. So let me share what I know. And I'll even share why I didn't grab onto this more significantly. Because ultimately, the prenatal eclipses, they are powerful in utero. All eclipses are transformational. And when you are in your created consciousness and before life, you feel the impact of the eclipses. And because they are transformational, and the prenatal eclipse is the first eclipse you go through, the energy of that eclipse is formative for who you are and what your life is to be. But those prenatal eclipses turn into the nodal placement in your chart at birth. Because where the nodes are tell us where the eclipses are. So that when a person takes their first breath and their nodes are where they are, for my example, North Node in Cancer, South Node in Capricorn, that meant that the eclipse that I had in utero were in Cancer and Capricorn because that's where the nodes were. So if the nodes at birth describe your karmic entrance, South Node, and your dharmic purpose, North Node, you get that karmic entrance, dharmic purpose integrated into your embodiment in the womb, in the eclipses that occur in the womb. Now, I think what Nancy is alluding to would be the idea that the eclipse points in utero would be powerful and valuable to sort of work with to understand purpose and, life. And all I can say about that is the idea seems fascinating and interesting. And because I've never, ever, ever calculated that for a chart and looked at it or looked at I could go and find out where my eclipse points were, figure out the point, and then do transits to that point and see. I say it would take me about 6 months to a year to figure out if there was anything to that, by looking, at the transits and seeing if I feel any shift or connection. That's a fascinating idea, but it's not anything I have any expertise in or value. So I'm sort of sorry, Nancy. I feel like you came at me hoping for a real clear and cogent answer, and I've given you my best truthful answer, which is, I don't know enough about this to really meet your expectations, but it definitely is a thing, and I think it is an interesting idea to consider, not just the relationship between your prenatal eclipses and where the nodes are at birth, but what those degree points are. It would be a fascinating empirical study, one that I'm not planning to do, but I hope your inquiry, Nancy, doesn't fall to the wayside just because I didn't give you the perfect answer.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully, your dream will make it onto the show. This week, we have a call-in dreamer from the UK. Hey, Catherine, what you dreaming?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I just wanted to explain that where I was coming from in putting this dream forward was, Michael, you've been covering so nicely with regard to the solar eclipse that's coming up, and that it's going to be conjunct Chiron.
Yes.
And believe it or not, this is taking place in my 12th house, which is dreams. So yeah, you just got to love how this all unfolds.
That's right.
So I've been doing some inner child healing, and what I wanted to bring forward was a reoccurring dream that I've had as a child. And when I say reoccurring, I'm talking hundreds of times.
Ooh, juicy recurring. All right.
So the dream works out that I'm walking on this path that's full of gravel and sand. And in order for me to move forward, for some reason, I just know that I've got to eat and consume the gravel. And as I'm continue walking, the path inclines into a bit of a hill, and the stones get bigger. And I keep consuming these stones as I'm going up. And then it gets to another point where all of a sudden it's not a hill anymore. It's a mountain. And I've now got boulders coming down this mountain, and I'm having to swallow these boulders as they're coming. Sometimes they come pretty quickly, and then other times it's like one and I consume it, and I just keep plodding on and keep plodding on. And of course, with the weight of these boulders and everything that I've consumed, my pace is slowed considerably. I never ever make it to the top of the mountain, ever. It's just more boulders and more boulders, even if I'm trying to look up. Another thing is, there's never really anything going on around me. It's pretty barren.
Right.
There's never, ever, in all the time I've had it, ever been anybody else in my dream, or that I've met something or seen something else. It's just this path and these boulders. And I wondered if I could get an insight as to what my subconscious was telling me as a child. I might be able to heal something, and I would love your take.
I would love to give you my take. This dream is, I almost feel like we've written a movie about a dream interpreter doing a podcast. It's like this, this dream is, I've been doing this so long. It is rare for me to hear a dream and say, I've never heard anything like this. Like, so I love that. So I got a couple of questions for you, Catherine. One is, how old were you when you first recall having this dream?
I would say probably about 6 or 7.
Okay, early. All right. Another question. In the progressive going higher and the gravel turning into rocks and then eventually boulders, was that a theme in all of the dreams, or as it progressed as you got older?
It was a theme to begin with, but as I got older, it was only the boulders.
Okay, let me make sure I'm reflecting this accurately. That early on, the rocks got bigger, but as you aged, it also got bigger too, boulders only.
I would say I also had boulders younger, but eventually when I was older,
it was only boulders.
It was only boulders.
It was only boulders. Okay. Wow. Okay. First of all, one of the reasons why I'm gobsmacked about the dream, Catherine, is that there's something ridiculously primal about this image as a reflection of just what life is, that we move through life. We are like earthworms, right? We suck in dirt and poop it out, and that's how we move through life. Worms really do this in the ground, right? And in the old Elizabethan sort of hierarchy of beings, you had like angels at the top and worms at the bottom. That comes right out of your lineage, honey, over there in the UK. So this idea of our digestive tracts allow us to take information in, make something out of it, and excrete it as poop is also symbolic of everything about moving through life, taking stuff in, transforming our understanding of it, and moving on. Right? So there's something profound about eating in this dream that's like eating life, taking a bite out of life, chewing your way through life. To me, then, this is like walking up the hill would be a good image of the symbol of your individual path through life. Like you start the dream of, I'm walking on a path. So right away, we know you're in the consideration of your personal journey. I think at an existential level. How do we know that? Because later you tell us there's nothing else ever going on. You're not in scenarios. You're not in relational reflection. You're not in different arenas. You're just in this walk in the path. And the path
Yes.
is our lives. The when you first just said, and it's, gravel and sand, my thought was, well, yes, life is an unstable walk. It's not solid between us. It sometimes looks solid, but it's bumpy and it could hurt our feet if we had to walk on it, right? So that's the first thought I had is, oh, Catherine's just dreaming about what it's like to walk an unstable path, but to get to a higher level of vantage point because you're climbing up the hill.
Yes.
Except then you say that you're eating it, that the demand is to eat it. And now I'm being sort of connected to all kinds of sort of profound, existential, like at the heart of it, all we are beings that eat and excrete and climb and die.
Okay.
So you see where I'm going with this? That the eating, the demand to eat the sand is just what it is to be charged with being in a body. It's like God or the divine says, okay, I'm going to send you on a journey and you have to eat the rocks as you go. And you have no choice. You got to eat what's in front of you. That's kind of
Yes.
symbolic of like life on life's terms.
Oh, yes. Of course. Yes.
As you grow in age and wisdom, you're capable of understanding more, of eating bigger meals, of taking a greater bite out of life, of handling more challenges, past, changes, death, rebirth moments, right? So that to me makes sense that as you climb, which we're seeing as you aging in growth and wisdom, you have to do more eating. It's harder,
Mm,
right? Not
yes.
easier.
Yes. Of course.
So climbing the mountain in any as an astrologer, I love Capricorn as the avatar that climbs the mountain. And we often think of the goats climbing the mountain as just associated with, I got a goal to meet and I'm going to meet it because I can eat a tin can if I have to as I go, and my feet handle rocks well. But there's a deeply spiritual bent to why the goat climbs the mountain. It's to get to a higher vantage point of conscious awareness, to be able to see further and understand life better. And this dream is that. You're
Oh,
climbing
wow.
up the mountain, and as you go, which your dream isn't showing you, the dream isn't showing you the beautiful vista that you get as you get higher and higher. It's
Mm,
just helping you process the deeper and harder life challenges that are now boulders.
yes.
And then your pace slows as you get higher. That's kind of like the grace of wisdom that comes from age, where we're less troubled by our difficulties and we get slower, more graceful because we've done the work, right? That's to me, the pace slows as you get higher. You never get to the top, honey, because there's no top to get to.
Of course. Oh, wow.
What's crazy about this dream for me, Catherine, especially that it came to you at 6 or 7 years old, is that this does not strike me as a recurring dream that was born out of like watching some kooky movie at 6 or 7 and seeing an image that your brain went, ooh, that's scary. Let's use that as a nightmare image. And then it stays with you for your whole life. Just like lots of kids today are dreaming about zombie apocalypses and vampires because their, video games are just filled with that imagery. You brought this up out of whole cloth, honey.
Okay.
Don't you
Wow.
think?
I think you're right. Wow. I hadn't thought of it that way.
When you started talking about the eating of the rocks, if I were a smarter man, I could call upon all sorts of origin stories that come in different First Nations, where there's all sorts of brutality to symbolically describe what it is to be here alive and in a body. And I think that life is difficult, but that if we eat the boulders along the way, we're going to get smarter and smarter. I don't think this is a dream that's about heaviness or badness. I think this is a dream that comes and has come in your childhood and beyond when the climb up the mountain of life has felt hard.
Yes.
Then you have the dream that says, you know how to do this. You just put one foot in front of the other. You eat the experience you're having. That's like taking in the lesson and integrating it. You eat it. It becomes part of you. So that the lessons you learn along the way, which we're going to say are represented by boulders, by eating them, the wisdom becomes a part of you. And the older and wiser you are, the bigger the pieces of wisdom. That's also why they slow down and get bigger. When we're young, everything's a crisis.
I actually love that because never at any point do they, get removed, extracted, or whatever.
Right. That's right.
I'm taking them with me all the time.
That's right. That's right.
Wow, that's incredible, Michael.
I like the idea, too, of rocks and earth as constructs of conscious awareness, where water in dreams is about unconscious material, 12th house, dreamer you. Filled with water, that 12th house is. Right?
Yes.
That these are about the practical, fungible, actual lessons you have learned along the way. They are now part of you and will continue as you climb up the mountain of your highest vantage point.
Oh, that's beautiful, Michael. I absolutely love that. Thank you
Thank
so very
you
much.
for sharing this dream. This was great. I loved it. Yay.
Oh, I feel so privileged. Thanks so very much.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.